September the 11th.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
Live from the Media Broadcasting Center.
Welcome to the new JFK show, number 100. Can you believe we've hit the century mark? We've been really working hard at bringing the truth. We're trying to bring the cutting edge things to us. Now, I'd like to bring to the attention that there is an article coming up in the National Enquirer magazine, which oddly enough has more credibility than the mainstream ones. It's they're going to have an article about Raphael.
Gary, did we lose you? Yeah, I agree. That on certain issues that the National Enquirer is doing the job and the mainstream media is not. Are we there, Chance? Are we online?
Yeah, we're rolling. Can y'all hear me? Okay. All right. So anyway, we're having a champion that the OIC is going to be featured in the National Enquirer. However, Larry is our guy who is really all about the evidence. So I feel we have to step carefully. There is a picture on Elm Street along with a lot of other people, and some people are saying it's Rafael Cruz. And as far as I know, I can't be convinced about it. I know Larry's looked into it. So we're going to talk about that, and also Robert Groden. So we're going to bring Robert Groden to the forefront. We've talked about him many times, and we're just completely exposing Groden for who he is. And so, Larry, can you tell us about this new thing about the article in the National Enquirer?
Yeah, good evening. Welcome to the new JFK show, to everybody that tunes in on a weekly basis here. The truth, and the alternative information that you don't see anywhere else, led by Professor James Fetzer. And we've lost him momentarily here, but the National Enquirer just published the Wayne Madsen information that we had presented in the previous show, which showed an individual matching the physical characteristics of Cruz's father at the trademark, handing out leaflets with the Lee Oswald down at the trademark in the summer of 1963. And that issue of the National Enquirer has already hit the supermarkets. And the next issue is supposed to be published has to do with the Cisco photograph, which shows the JFK limousine on Main Street before it reaches the Houston intersection, the Houston Street intersection. And it is a picture, the photograph that's very familiar to researchers because it's in color, and it shows the limo from an overhead angle where you can see inside of the limousine and the occupants and the motorcycle cops, Bobby Hart just on the left, and B.J. Martin. And to the limo's left, a row of people, of spectators, and Ralph Sinkay has put forth the idea that there's an individual there in glasses that also looks a lot like Mr. Cruz. Now, I just wanted to mention that Cubans on the November 22nd, 1963, it's common knowledge that there were many Cubans that were holding hate signs along the parade route that day. So it's not so far-fetched to assume that it is possible that he might have been in Dallas that day. I don't know. I have no evidence to support that notion. But Ralph has identified, at least momentarily for the time being, Cruz as one of the people in the Cisco photograph. So that's bringing you up to date right now, and that is supposed to be coming out soon in the National Enquirer, and the OIC is going to be mentioned also.
All right. So what is the OIC's position on him being Rafael Cruz in Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination?
Well, it's not actually Dealey Plaza. It's close to Dealey Plaza, but I have no position on that. I would need further corroboration on that. But anything is possible, Gary.
Tell us more about the article again in the National Enquirer.
Yeah, it already hit the supermarkets this past week that had to do what we had already talked about in the previous show, the Wayne Madsen piece that showed him at the Trade Mart down in New Orleans, downtown New Orleans, in the summer of 1963, and that we did some comparisons. And again, that was also, it wasn't conclusive, but it looked, a lot of the features sort of lined up, and on that occasion we also stated that. So anything is possible, Gary. The photograph of the man at the Trade Mart next to Lee Oswald, and I have mentioned this many times, the photograph is not clear enough to really allow us to render a photographic comparison that is as ironclad as what we have done with the man in the doorway. Okay, but it's all still being researched, by a lot of people.
Yeah, let's be clear that the jury is still out on this Rafael Cruz being near Dealey Plaza and also at the Trade Mart handing out Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets with Lee Oswald. So we're on it, but we're trying to maintain our credibility as well.
Jim's mic is muted right now.
So what do you have to feel about all this National Enquirer, Dr. Fetzer?
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Well, I think it's fascinating, and it's one more thorn on the side of Ted Cruz. He has quite a few at this point in time. I think that Donald has all but sealed the nomination for himself, but Cruz is a very peculiar case, and there are so many questions that are related to him. We have some tremendous material here this evening, Gary. However, I'd like to proceed to give background for what Larry has to present about a very prominent member of the research community. If we look at the very first slide, you'll see the image from a film he did about the assassination, a documentary entitled JFK, The Case for Conspiracy, which was the same as the title of a book he did with Peter Modell entitled JFK, The Case for Conspiracy, and I'm talking about Robert Groden. If we go to the next slide, you'll recognize how much good work Groden has done, or how much apparently good work he has done, including, of course, co-authoring the book High Treason with Harry Livingston, and publishing the compilation of photographs known as The Killing of a President, with a lot of commentary, most of which is accurate, and The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald, which has the best discussion of the shooting of Officer Tippit and the evidence related to that I've encountered yet. But here, as we see in the next slide, there are a number of reasons for questioning whether Groden is completely on the up and up. To my astonishment, he denies the existence of a bullet hole in the windshield. He defends a set of autopsy photos that seem to be fabrications. He claims his Zapruder film is authentic, which actually is very odd in relation to one, because as we're going to see, there are frames in the Zapruder film that show the bullet striking the windshield. He maintains the Alchin 6 is also authentic, but denies that Oswald was in the doorway during the shooting. He offers an alternative explanation of his location at the time, which also implies that Lee cannot have been on the 6th floor, but where it's really quite fascinating that he's involved in so many of these issues, where we're going to get to the heart of the matter momentarily. If we go to the next slide, you'll see here that Groden, in The Killing of a President, it's hard to read the text, but he shows he's got an image of the Alchin 6 crop, where you can see virtually in the middle of that image, the small white spiral nebula, which has a dark hole in the center, where JFK's left ear would be if JFK's left ear were visible. And you see in the text where he says there's no damage to the windshield, notwithstanding the fact that we're looking right at it. If we go to the next slide, we see a comparison between the windshield as it was in the Alchin's photograph, with an arrow now to the location I was identifying as that small white spiral nebula with a dark hole in the center, where Jim Lewis has been going through junkyards in the South and firing high-powered rifles through the windshields of vehicles to see if he could hit a dummy in the back. He's not succeeded in doing so, but he's confirmed that it makes a small white spiral nebula as it passes through, and the sound of a firecracker, where we all recall that many of the witnesses reported that the first shot sounded different than the rest and resembled that of a firecracker. And then on the right, we have the spider web crack in the windshield the Secret Service would later produce. Doug Wilden, in his brilliant book, research, published in Murder in Dealey Plaza, actually tracked down the official at Ford Motor Company that was responsible for replacing the windshield, who confirmed that it had a through-and-through hole and that the windshield they replaced it with was brand new. So what happened is the Secret Service had other windshields where Bob Livingston, World Authority on the Human Brain, had reported already in Assassination Science 1998 that the Secret Service had obtained about 20 of these, claiming it was for target practice. But it's clear they wanted to see what it would take to penetrate the windshield to hit the president, and also to have them available to fabricate a phony replacement, as we see on right. If you go to the next, this is the report of Thomas Evan, 225. And there are frames in the Zapruder film that show the bullet hole too. So if Groden thinks that the film is authentic, then he shouldn't be denying that there's a hole in the windshield, because we can see its presence even in frames in the Zapruder film. Now, the next is very interesting. It's the notes that were given by Thomas Evan Robinson, who was the mortician who prepared the body for funeral, and to a private investigator in May 26, 1992, where he described the gaping hole at the back of the head, the smaller wound in the right temple, the blown out crescent flap. But here, most interesting, approximately 2 small shrapnel wounds in the face, which were packed with wax. This is relevant to the bullet passing through the windshield, because David Mantik, MD, PhD, the leading medical expert in the world on the JFK assassination, believes those were caused by tiny shards of glass that penetrated JFK's face when the bullet passed through the windshield, which I regard as a brilliant inference about how to explain it. Robinson only discovered when he was introducing embalming fluid and it was leaking out of JFK's face. Now, if you look at the next slide, you see indications not only of the difference between the wounds as they were at Parkland at the top. We had a small clean puncture wound on the top left and a small clean puncture wound with a straight line incision on the right. But after the body was brought back to Bethesda, we find that that wound to the throat had been greatly enlarged. In fact, Bob Livingston has reported receiving a phone call from Commander Humes asking him what that wound would have looked like if it had been an exit wound instead of an entry. And it appears to me that he actually used Bob's description to alter the wound to more resemble an exit wound at the bottom left. And then on the right, you see that skull flap blowout just above the ear, where I believe the ear was actually severely damaged when this fragile or exploding bullet blew his brains out the back of his already weakened cranium. But notice we don't see the hole in the back of the head here. It's clearly been covered up, where this was an HSCA photograph. Very, very troubling. Look at the next slide and you'll see more of what I'm talking about, including at the top, 2 photographs that Robert Groden insists are authentic. But look at the length of the hair. These, I believe, were contrived to correspond to the idea that the bullet had entered low and entered out the top of his head. But they're clear fabrications. I mean, look at the length of the hair, even in the fake photograph at the lower left from the HSCA. The length of the hair is approximately right, but in the Groden photographs is not, where during their deposition of James Humes, the ARRB, at the suggestion of David Mantik and others, asked Commander Humes whether the patient had been given a shampoo and a haircut during the autopsy, to which he replied, no. It's absurd, of course. But how else do you get this kind of event at the top from these fake photographs that Robert Groden has introduced and promoted, and in comparison with a fake HSCA, which at least have the hair length right? And just to see how deceptive is the HSCA, look at the next slide, which is a Harper fragment. And you'll appreciate the enormity of the Harper fragment. There's no place for that bone to have been blown out in terms of the HSCA. which is more revealing of the extent to which the HSCA was trying to redo the cover-up in a manner that would be more successful than the Warren Commission, but they blew it in so many different ways. When I asked Cyril Wecht, who'd actually been on the medical panel for the HSCA, how they accounted for, well, I'll hold off the point for one more slide. Look at the next slide, and you'll see what David Manick discovered about the enormity of the patch that was imposed. There you have the official lateral cranial x-ray taken from the right side of the head. In the middle, you see the area that he defined as area P for patch. And you can compare that with frame 374, which I discovered by contemplating whether those who were doing the alteration of the film might have focused so much on frames related to 313 that they overlooked that you might actually be able to see it in later frames. And just notice the blowout, the pink part.
Hello?
Yeah, looks like we lost Dr. Fetzer right there. He'll probably be back in just a second.
Right.
Larry is.
Yeah. Well, this is frame I believe 374 that Dr. Fetzer is referring to on the right, where he found the blowout in the back of the head. Okay, and okay, there he is. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta unmute him.
Unmute there, Doc.
Chance, we're on the wrong. Go to the next slide, please. David Lifton was the first to recognize that there was an enormous difference between the description of the blowout on the head in the autopsy report, where he reconstructed this massive blowout. Look, it's about half of the back of the head is missing, versus the fist-sized wound seen at Parkland reported by Clint Hill and others, versus, of course, the absurdity on the right, which is the HSCA. So that when I called Cyril Wecht, who'd been on the HSCA medical panel, and asked Cyril, I said, how did the HSCA account for the enormous discrepancy between the description of this massive blowout seen in the autopsy report, which is described in mathematical detail, and the single hole they introduced at the top of the head, which was even 4 inches higher than the wound at the back of the head the Bethesda physicians had properly identified? He said to me, I'll have to check my notes. In the next slide, you'll see a comparison of what we have discovered in frame 374 and earlier frames where the blowout was painted over in black. I mean, look on the right where you have that huge blowout, the skull flap and all that, with on the left where it's been painted out in black. And we all know that professional Hollywood film restoration experts have been studying the forensic copy of the film. I've been in their studio. I've seen the version. It's remarkably clear and precise, and we're astonished at the amateurishness of the manner in which the blowout had been painted over. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see what Larry Rivera had discovered in an even earlier frame, where Jackie's hand and her white glove just happened to be in the right position to illustrate the extent of the massive blowout, and where we have several slides in a row. Larry, would you like to comment on them?
Yeah, this was, we've done a few shows and discussed this before, but since it falls into places with what we're talking about, where Groden was, in fact, I believe Groden was the first researcher to get his hands on those autopsy photographs that showed that clean back of the head with a little small hole in it, which obviously have been doctored, where, you know, matte inserts have been used to create the impression that the back of the head is intact. Now, when you compare those images, those photographs, with what we see here in frame 343, which I obtained from a very clear copy of the Zapruder film that I found in a documentary, and you can see. It's very obvious that the jagged edge here of the blowout in the back of the head, and the next slide is going to illustrate it even further, because what we have done in the next slide is actually trace, you know, where the skull should have been, and how the glove of Jackie provides the perfect background for the viewer to appreciate the massive amount of damage to JFK skull there in the occipital parietal area. And I also wanted to mention and back up a little bit from when you were discussing David Mantic, that he has published this marvelous book on the Harper fragment, where he has conclusively proven that it is occipital parietal bone. Okay, and that is irrefutable. The research in his book has been accepted by all the peer reviewed by everybody in the JFK community, and they all agree that the Harper fragment came from that area of the skull. This next slide also illustrates in a different manner how we can see that area of the rear of the head, which has been completely blasted out, Jim.
Larry, why don't you continue with a series of slides that follow to demonstrate the new revelations we have about Robert Groden, especially that emanate from his book with Peter Modell, published in 1976, JFK, The Case for Conspiracy.
Yeah, well, this past weekend, I believe you received an email from an individual who pointed out how Groden had published in this book in 1976 regarding who the man in the doorway was at that time. Peter Modell was a writer from New York, and he teamed up with Groden at the time. And this was a little before Groden was hired as a photographic consultant for the HSCA. All right, okay. And apparently,
Larry, we've been asked to identify who Robert Groden is. He is one of the most prominent public figures in the JFK assassination research community. He and Josiah Thompson were early champions of the conspiracy movement, or at least were so regarded. We have in past programs demonstrated that Josiah Thompson actually was leading us down the wrong path and has repudiated his best work, the double hit theory, in order to prepare to denounce conspiracy for the 50th. But because I'd already talked about his planning to do just that, they abandoned the project. And now we're going into Robert Groden, who, by the way, among other things, was a first to get a bootleg copy of the Zapruder film on television in 1975 when he and Dick Gregory appeared with Geraldo on his show. It was broadcast for the first time. In fact, it was the public seeing the film in the violent back and to the left motion, indicative of a shot fired from the right front, that led to the creation of the House Select Committee on Assassinations and the reinvestigation. So Groden has played a pivotal role there and in other regards.
Yes, well, I'll go a little bit further back, Jim. Groden was 18 years old on November 22nd. That was his birthday. It happened to be his birthday, November 22nd, 1963. And he had been napping that day, and as the book explains, and his mother woke him up and told him about the assassination. And ever since that moment, he had been supposedly hooked on the assassination and the aftermath. And he at a very early age, in his early 20s, he began to cozy up to a lot of the researchers at the time. And in 1969, he met Harold Weisberg and became very, very good friends with Mr. Weisberg, to the point where he used to spend weekends at Weisberg's house over in Maryland. And so, he helped Weisberg out in many ways, providing blow-ups and enhancements of the Zapruder film. And like I mentioned earlier, apparently he was the very first researcher to get his hands on the autopsy photographs, which showed the back of the head intact. Okay, then later on he published talking about with Modell in 1976. And apparently, this book, despite having a lot of really good information, was not that good a seller. And in the summer of 1966, it seems like Mr. Groden might have been out of a job, and soon thereafter, he was hired as a photographic consultant to the House Select Committee on Assassination.
Yeah, you can't emphasize that enough, that Groden was actually hired by the House Select Committee for the specific purpose of determining the identity of the man in the doorway. Continue, Larry, advance the slides.
Yeah, and this is one of the major contributions to the Man in the Doorway issue. This very clear blow up of the people that were in the doorway, where we have proven, I believe, with our overlay technology and computer enhancements, that the Man in the Doorway is actually Lee Harvey Oswald.
We have proven it, but not only beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning no alternative hypothesis is reasonable, but I would submit beyond any doubt. The evidence, the mass, the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, the T-shirt, but your brilliant work by introducing Lee Harvey Oswald's face and that of Billy Lovelady into the image of Doorman, I think has sealed the deal.
Yeah, well, it's and we have taken that research even further using other images of Billy Lovelady, where we have excluding Lee Oswald as a possibility. We have excluded beyond any doubt that Billy Lovelady would possess the features that are seen on Doorman, when we set the interpupillary distance and scale the faces accordingly. Then it's pretty obvious and it's very conclusive.
Yeah. Go for it, Larry. Go on to Groden.
Yeah, and then the next slide is an article that we found back from 1976 in the Orlando Sentinel, where it very clearly says here that Robert Groden and Peter Modell, when they published their book, that it was Lee Harvey Oswald standing there in the doorway.
Let me read the first two paragraphs. Was Lee Harvey Oswald standing quietly in a doorway of the Texas School Book Depository at the time official records say he was killing President John F. Kennedy with a rifle shot fired from a sixth-floor window? The answer is yes, according to Robert J. Groden, the earnest young author with F. Peter Modell of the new paperback JFK, The Case for Conspiracy, which I have been showing here. The Case for Conspiracy, Groden and Modell. Go on.
That's right. And the next slide is the actual reference to that book, page 148, I believe. Yeah, page 148 and 149, where the authors discuss the Man in the Doorway. Now, a lot of the information that Groden obtained obviously came from Harold Weisberg, because we have discussed this many times. Whitewash 2 was the volume where Weisberg came out with the 9-point comparison of the shirts, and a very important point here about the shirts, because we're going to show something very, very disturbing to Harold Weisberg, that when Groden published that famous book, Killing of a President. Okay. Now the next slide is also from
Well, let me read a couple of passages from this page.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, back up here a little bit. Yeah, right there.
Well, it is true that Oswald and Lovelady shared many similar facial features, leading to the confusion the shirt discrepancies are too great. Other amateur films made that day in color show two men resembling each other facially, but only facially, where Lovelady was wearing a broad red and blue, actually it was red and white, plaid. Well, here they're talking about a broad red and blue plaid shirt, but actually we know, Larry, that it was the red and white vertically striped short-sleeved shirt. When arrested, Oswald wore a T-shirt with a broken elastic collar. Actually, it was stretched. And the same orange tweed shirt with missing buttons, accounting for the open front in the Alchin's photo. While the cheeks, noses, hairlines, and eyes of the two could, in truth, belong to either one, Oswald was clean-shaven, the other Lovelady had a growth of beard. This is evident from seeing three other amateur films, two in color, one in black and white. Crucial as this identification is to the heart of the case, observes researcher Harold Weisberg, in all 10 million words, the Warren Report does not print any of these photographs. No wonder, had it done so, the verdict would never have stood up. Lee Harvey Oswald could not have stood in the doorway on the first floor while he was on the sixth floor killing the president with a rifle. As Weisberg puts it, pictures may not lie, but they can be made to lie by ignoring them.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, the fact is, we know that pictures can lie because they altered frames of the Zapruder film, for example. So not even that claim is correct, but Weisberg was unaware of the technology at the time.
Well, they altered frames from the Zapruder film, and they removed frames because we have noticed the speed glitches and the blink rates with Roy mentioning Roy Schaefer's tremendous research on that, and so it's kind of the question is.
Yes, go to 20, Chance. Go to 20. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the caption there actually, I can read it.
The blow up of the man in the doorway shows him wearing the same tweed pattern overshirt and the same T-shirt.
That's right. The caption on the lower photograph. This blow up of the man in the doorway shows him wearing the same tweed pattern overshirt, the same T-shirt with worn elastic that Oswald wore at the time of his arrest.
All right.
Exactly, Larry.
All right. Next slide, please.
21.
This is page 186 of Killing of a President, and this is where Groden does a 180-degree turnaround here, where he actually talks about.
Larry, are you there? Did we lose him?
I'm here.
Where Groden does a 180-degree turn and denies that the man in the doorway is Lee Oswald, affirms it was Billy Lovelady, which is fairly shocking in and of itself.
That's right. Now, can you hear me? Oh.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, now see, the top right, and this is what was very disturbing in the eyes of Harold Weisberg. If you look at the shirt at the top right, the way that it's been arranged, as you can see, the shirt itself has the collar all tied up together. Okay. And it's obvious that the top two buttons are missing. The top three buttons are missing, and this is the exact shirt that Lee Oswald was wearing. And in Harold Weisberg's book, where he criticizes Groden, this is one of his main points of criticism, where he was saying that when Groden published this page of his book, he was making the shirt look more like the man in the doorway in the Martin film. Okay, with the inference being that this was the same shirt, and obviously Weisberg called him out on that type of deception, and said, "Wait a minute, that's Lee Oswald's shirt, and that's not the way that he was wearing it." Okay, he was wearing it completely splayed open. It was a worn shirt, okay, and that's not the way it was arranged, okay. So he right away pointed out the deception here that apparently was being played out here on page 186 of this book. Okay, I can't hear Jim. Okay, now this is page 187, and we have discussed this before regarding the shirt of the man, which we call Gorilla Man. And the shirt that he was wearing, and with the obvious pocket flap in the pocket on the left breast, which is absent in the other photographs of Billy Lovelady, and that plaid shirt, checkered colored shirt that he was wearing when Groden went to photograph him in Denver in 1976, and the other photograph at the top where I believe it was Jackson that took that picture of him standing there in the doorway, where neither of those shirts exhibit the pocket and the flap there on the left breast. Yeah,
but of course the actual shirt that Billy Lovelady was wearing is shown in the middle. It's this vertically striped red and white shirt.
That's right. That's
sleeve, which means the FBI which means it's a non-starter to even think that Billy was doorman, because he was wearing a short sleeve shirt with red and white vertical stripes. So Groden has been the primary force behind perpetrating the fraud on the American people, that doorman was wearing a red and black checkered shirt. I mean, it's an outrage, Larry. When you get right down to it, it's disgusting.
Well, we zoom in on that issue right now on the next slide, where we show close-ups of the individual in the Martin film. And it's pretty obvious here where that is a pocket and a flap with a little button, okay, and it seems like there might even be something in there, maybe a pack of cigarettes in there. And when you compare to the three photographs at the top, which are the ones that Groden took of Lovelady in Denver in 1976, which were later published in the House Select Committee addendums, which, by the way, we did not were not published, were not released until the early 90s after the the ARRB came into play.
Bear in mind that Groden is supposed to be a photographic expert. He couldn't possibly miss the difference that there's a pocket on the shirt of the man they're posing to be Billy Lovelady, who in fact is a third person altogether, to whom we refer to as Gorilla Man. Even if you look at his profile there with a photo at the top leftmost in the center, you can see they have completely different profiles. This is one of the greatest disgraces in the history of JFK research, in my opinion, Larry.
Well, as Professor John Johnson wrote in one of his marvelous articles in the fourth decade, this would be the evidence of a massive hoax perpetrated on the American public. Okay?
By Robert Groden.
Yeah. Keep in mind that Robert Groden to this day, so if he switched over in 76, we're talking 40 years of
deceit, deception. 40 years of deceit, deception.
Now, if you were in Dallas just the very last year, or at the New Orleans conference, his job was to talk about the Z film being authentic and Billy Lovelady being in the doorway. That is his job, and if I'm counting right, it's about 40 years on, or he's been making a pretty good paycheck on doing that one.
It's right here. We're going to get to that briefly here. Okay, the next slide shows us this sort of like a chronological guide here, where Harold Weisberg was talking about the dire straits that Groden was going through in the summer of 1976. Before he was hired by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And the next slide is a document that was not released until the early 90s. And this is a smoking gun as far as I'm concerned, Jim, because this is a statement, okay, that was taken by Kenneth Bruton, who was assistant counsel for Richard Sprague, the first counsel for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, who was later fired because he insisted on getting all the information out from the CIA and the FBI without any type of intermediaries or buffers or anybody who would prevent him from getting, all the documents that he wanted for his investigation, and he got fired because of that. Okay. Now, this document, which we submitted to a handwriting expert who is certified, who has done a lot of work in criminal investigations, and who has presented her expertise in courts and in cases, in civil and criminal cases, and this is a comparison of the signatures of Lovelady. Now, what this statement is saying is that the man standing in the entrance of the doorway with the plaited shirt on is Billy and Lovelady, and it's signed by Billy Lovelady. As a witness, we have Patricia Lovelady, with Billy's wife, and she says, "I hereby identify this to be my husband, Billy Nolan Lovelady." Okay, and at the bottom, it's supposedly witnessed by Robert Groden on 11/13/1976, and Kenneth Bruton at the top. Okay, now Kenneth Bruton, being a lawyer and being a professional, I would presume, for them to have brought out this type of document, in my mind, is pretty pathetic. Okay, now any lawyer would have known that an affidavit should have been drawn up with an impartial notary public bearing witness to this, and having the seal stamped on the document. Okay, now this is a very informal, very weird, for lack of a better word, document where they're trying to confirm that it's Billy Lovelady. And what we did is that I see that it's supposedly signed by Billy Lovelady, and we went and we and we dug up his signatures from bona fide affidavits that we knew belonged to Billy Lovelady from November 22nd, 1963, the weekend of the assassination. And we said, well, let's know what a professional would think about this, okay? And we see both of the signatures here, and they don't look alike at all, okay? But we submitted them to somebody who didn't even know who Billy Lovelady was, okay? And the next slide.
And what it turned out was that Groden had faked the signature of Billy Lovelady, Larry. You can't drive that home hard enough.
Well, apparently, and this is the opinion of Kim Johnson. She's a CMHA, okay? And you want to just read this through for us, Jim? I mean, this is stunning here.
The opinion of a professional. Recently, a thorough handwriting analysis of this document was performed by certified handwriting expert Kim Johnson, CMHA. This is the result of her study. Clearly, the two signature exemplars look little alike. One is bigger than the other. One uses a middle name, the other does not. In addition, there are numerous variances in letter formation accompanied by major differences in at least 7 separate graphology areas. Furthermore, other than diacritical heights, upper zone widths, and capital letter widths, there are no modes or measurements alike. However, I did not anticipate that diacriticals, upper zone, and capitals would fall within the same mode. This gives me a lot of pause. Kindly remember that such measurements are mostly subconsciously driven and automatic. Some flagrant stroke or letter formation differences are briefly listed here. Exemplar 1, angular upper zone formations. Exemplar 2, upper zone formations are rounded. Exemplar 1, the capital B in Billy is embellished. Exemplar 2 is not. Exemplar 1, final signature stroke varies completely from exemplar number 2. Exemplar number 2, middle initial N, much smaller than rest of signature. Exemplar 1 is not. Exemplar 2 has a broader D loop in Lovelady than number 1. Exemplar 2 is decided directional pressure. Y in Lovelady, number 1 does not. Exemplar 2 has decided varying heights of the two I's in Billy, while 1 does not. This is, however, not conclusive. More handwriting samples desired. Exemplar 2 has broader E loop than exemplar 1. However, this particular trait is not fixed. Exemplar number 1 has a left-leaning final stroke, L in Lovelady. Number 2 does not. Evidence of slow writing. Exemplar number 1 stabs his ovals. Number 2 uses garlands. Exemplar number 2 has a fishhook on his capital L, Lovelady. It is absent in number 1. Emphasis, hours. Exemplar number 1 uses retracing strokes on Billy, indicating much tension. Number 2 does not. Exemplar 2 has eliminated the final Y in Lovelady. In 1, it is evident.
In red, important postscript, the handwritten note dated 11/22/1976, which begins, the man standing in the entrance contains a lie. In other words, the writer is lying when he identifies the man as Billy N. Lovelady.
Yeah. So, can I translate here? We have a forged document by Robert Groden. It's what we have.
I don't think it gets any more specific than this, Jim, okay?
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to the next slide quickly here.
27.
27. Okay. Now this is a portion of a letter from Weisberg where he is sort of like wondering where was Robert Groden that weekend. Okay, and Groden apparently was very evasive, in telling him and letting him know, where he was, and he says that he had been on a short trip. Okay, and Weisberg is questioning, the ellipsis. In other words, his sudden disappearances. When he couldn't find him and that kind of thing. And he assumed that what Groden was doing at that time was dealing with the Oswald Lovelady shirt issue. Okay, and so that's sort of like. Leads us on to the next slide here.
Well, Larry, let me offer a conjecture. He was being solicited by the HSCA and by some of its staff to become a special consultant on the condition that he would reverse the position he adopted in the book with Modal.
That's a very good assumption, Jim. A very good inference.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm presenting, these facts. I'm being as factual and analytical as possible here. But the information being provided here is pretty obvious here. And over the years, Groden and Weisberg had a very serious falling out, which led him to actually write a book on what Groden represented as far as Weisberg was concerned. We can go on to the next slide, please. In the JFK community and the assassination industry, what he called. Okay, and this is copyrighted 1996. And if you read this document, it's pretty stunning in the way Weisberg really tears Groden apart, from the beginning all the way to the end. One of the main issues that Weisberg was concerned is that when the film JFK was being filmed and produced by Oliver Stone, where he brought on Groden as a photographic consultant and also actually helping him do all the filming in Dealey Plaza and where everybody was and where the motorcycle and the limos and everything, and there was a copy of the script that was leaked. Okay, to the press, and this script, the copy of the script, was used to by the mainstream media to attack Oliver Stone in a way that had never been ever done by anybody filming a movie, especially one that is controversial as this one. And
Larry, did we lose you again? They really don't want this out tonight, Chance. It's unbelievable how many times we've been disrupted. Just unbelievable.
Larry's doing good.
We need.
Yeah.
And I think we're dropping in and out on your end.
So basically what happened was that Weisberg was accused of being the one because he was provided with a copy of the script, and by inference, a lot of the researchers assumed that it had been Weisberg, the one who had leaked Oliver Stone's script. Okay, and so this coupled with a lot of the other issues that Weisberg thought that Groden wasn't being honest about, specifically plagiarism, disinformation, which he talks about in this book here, and the title of the book is obviously picturing the corruption of the JFK assassination, and he goes through a lot of the different issues that he had with Groden and the discrepancies and what he thought that Groden misrepresented in the JFK assassination industry, and one of those had to do with the man in the doorway. And this next slide is a study that we did of Billy Lovelady and Gorilla Man, who was the man in the Martin film. And what we did was find the two best images that showed him in profile and compared him to the profile of Billy Lovelady that was taken at by the FBI on February the 29th, 1964. And we just lined up the features. And at the bottom, when we lined up the ears, okay, the top of the head did not line up. When we lined up the top of the cranium, the chin and the nose did not line up, or the ear, and so on and so forth. The chins, when we lined those up, and you can see how dissimilar they are when you compare, for example, the angle of the neck. Okay, Lovelady, the angle of his neck was sort of straight down. The man that we show as Gorilla Man was at an angle. Okay, the hairline. Once we started working with these, we found a great deal of difference between one and the other. The occipital protuberances were not the same. The ear angle in Lovelady was more vertical. The bald spot was different.
And yet, Groden, the HSCA Council never noticed these discrepancies. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, and if you look closely at the top left image, you'll notice that the plaid shirt is buttoned up to the neck, and this goes back to what we were discussing earlier on page 186 of his book. Okay, this is the reason why Weisberg said that the deception that was involved in Groden's book on page 186, where he presented that Oswald's shirt completely shut at the top. Okay, and that's what his point was.
Sure.
That what they were trying to do was make him look like Gorilla Man in the Martin film. Okay, so
no, he didn't fool Weisberg. Let's go to your next slide, Larry.
Yes. Okay, and this is an excerpt that we have here from Weisberg's book that just shows, by and large, a lot of the issues that he had with Groden, and what I was just talking about, where the Lovelady shirt was buttoned to the top, okay, to the top of the collar, and that's not the way that the man in the doorway's shirt was, okay, and just by that issue alone, Weisberg was able to completely refute Groden's research, okay, or what Groden was trying to present, okay. Now we want to finish this presentation with something that's really important here. It's going to blow everybody's mind. It's stuff that's already known. Okay, the next slide. Groden was brought in.
Larry, you got to move forward. We only have about 7 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was just. Yeah, this was Groden was brought in to the O.J. Simpson civil trial when the Goldmans sued him for damages regarding
Just for the audience, remember, O.J. was accused of murdering not only Nicole Simpson, but Ron Goldman, who was a young man who'd come to her house ostensibly to return a pair of glasses she'd left behind at the Mezzaluna restaurant. Though they may, in fact, have had a relationship, as far as the story goes, he was just there innocently returning the glasses when he was slashed to death by the perp.
That's right, and he was found innocent in the criminal case, and this goes back to the unrest and the
which had to do with the gloves that didn't fit, where they contrived the situation by having O.J. put on latex gloves over what would have been skin-tight fitting leather gloves to create the impression they didn't fit, and then Johnny Cochran argued, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit.
That's right, but the point in time of that trial was very important because what had happened previously, a couple of years before with Rodney King, with the beating that he received, sort of prejudiced this jury to, especially being, from inner city Los Angeles, and not being an all-white jury, where they found him innocent despite all of the incredible evidence that was presented against O.J. Simpson. But a couple of years later, when the civil trial came, where only 75% of the jury needed to be in accordance in order to render a verdict, they brought in Groden. And Groden was brought in as a supposed photographic expert to talk about the Bruno Magli shoes that were shown in a photograph of O.J. Simpson at a Buffalo Bills game a few years.
Explain why they were important, Larry.
Yeah, the reason they were important is because the prints of those shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Okay, and it was very specific that it was those shoes, that those shoes had been identified as the shoes that belonged to the perpetrator of the assassination of Nicole and Ron Goldman, and so that was already established that those shoes were belonged to the man who killed these two individuals. Now, when the civil trial came up, and they found O.J. Wearing those shoes at a Buffalo Bills game where he was brought out as one of the heroes, one of the players who had played for the Buffalo Bills and had ran for 2,000 yards one year, whatever, and was a hero in Buffalo, and so there, but lo and behold, he was wearing Bruno Magli shoes.
So
okay,
they needed Robert Groden to debunk the evidence that O.J. actually had this pair of shoes.
That's right, and what Groden came out was under oath. I might add that photograph had been doctored, that photograph had been messed around with, and that it wasn't real. That it was a fabrication. Okay.
And then it turned out that
So then, what happened was that this photograph had been published in the Globe, one of these tabloids, supermarket tabloids, and they went in and they found the photographer, and the photographer had about 30 other photographs of the same event that showed other photographs, in fact, even better photographs that they were able
of O.J. wearing the very same shoes, so Groden had given false testimony under oath.
That's right. That's right.
Let's go to your next slide, Larry. I want to make sure we polish them up.
Yeah. So the next slide is Weisberg talking about exactly the effect that Groden's appearance in this trial had, where as soon as he gave his misrepresentation there at that trial, the case against Simpson was cinched completely, and the plaintiffs completely abandoned.
Because they could bring out all these other photographs that proved O.J. had the shoes, which he denied even owning.
That's right, and Weisberg minces no words, where he says that Groden, for example, and I'll just read this, had what Groden, where they brought other professionals who with the proper credentials, and who had what Groden did not have, the proper education, the training, the professional experience. In effect, Groden made those shoes the central part of the case. The plaintiffs ended the case immediately after the effective rebuttals they were able to present to the jury. That left those shoes in the front of the minds of these jurors, the last thing Simpson's lawyers wanted, and what the lawyer for the plaintiffs might well have preferred. That was the end of the case.
So Groden made a contribution, ironically, in helping to prove that O.J. had committed the crime. Go to the last two slides, Larry, before we have to wrap it up.
And these are slides that we have presented before. The man in the doorway, the comparison with Billy Lovelady, our photogrammetric comparisons, which show conclusively that the man in the doorway is in fact Lee Oswald and not Billy Lovelady. And this is the first slide is with one of the pictures, the one that we inverted, okay, that we were criticized so much for. But the last slide is the one from the Lovelady image from the Tom Jackson photo shoot, which shows the non-inverted version of Lovelady. If you look closely on the right, the ear doesn't even reach far enough to match the ear of Doorman, and the nose is completely disjointed. The lips are out of place.
Larry, brilliant job. Gary, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I'd like to give a little credit if it is due. Was there a specific person who brought up the 1976 Robert Groden book?
Oh, yeah, well, Jim has that information.
Yeah, I'd have to check my email, Gary. Just take us out.
All right. We'll make sure to get credit for that next time. All right, this has been the JFK Show number 100. Chance George, Dr. Fetzer, Larry Rivera, and myself. We'll see you next week for show 101.